Welcome to Bubble Tea Time. I'm your host, Adam A. Digital Feeling. Thank you for joining us this week. We'll be watching highlights from Week 1 stars, reviewing the matches, and presenting next week's predictions. Today, I'm joined by Brian, aka Decadonu, Colin, a Zoidberg MD, and Daniel, aka Dan. So, this analyst us for this week. So, really appreciate y'all coming on, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us
Thanks.
again.
Back again.
Yeah, for our week one review, no less. So it's gonna be awesome. And we also have our special guest, Joe, aka Avis Argentea, who has the traditional dog cam with us. Welcome, Joe.
Howdy, y'all.
Well, very awesome. Joe will be joining us for the entire segments of today. And so we will also be opening up questions for Joe about Milwaukee Bucks Baby's barn burner of a match. Please, in Twitch, post your questions and we'll have somebody uh, grab those for you and we'll see if we can toss them towards Joe. So if you have anything, let us know. Discord as well. Well, let's get right into it with our highlights. We're going to start with our first one, which is going to feature our special guest. And we'll give it to the analyst for this.
Yeah, I think we should give it to Joe for this. So what's going on here, Joe?
So the student council here is gonna make the mistake of pushing too hard onto our support Leona and outroot them, therefore giving us a chance to just uh, put all of our damage into them. Plobe gets chomped. We get a lot of good CC on the other team, and then the team is wiped from there. So this allows us to transition into a mid tower and a Baron later. Yep.
Yeah, and viewers can notice the miasma clearly grouped up on 3 people there, and as it grounds people, they can't flash out, and they've clearly overcommitted. It's great.
Yeah, it's a really good miasma, basically.
Mhm.
Well done. Really good counter engage.
Joe, with that, was there a really big push for trying to fight in those corridors versus the student council? Or was it just an opportunity that showed up for all of you?
So throughout the game, we started looking more for the fights because we knew that the student council, their win condition was to split push with Jax and then just pressure the map that way. So we tried to force objectives. We weren't really too concerned about where they were. We just wanted the 5v5, and that was our game plan in that game.
Uh, really wonderful fight. Really swung the game in my opinion as being a part of the student council. Really good mechanics as well that we saw from the entire team. But next we're gonna move on to a clip of the entire team, and we'll kind of have everybody make their comments on that. I believe starting with Joe.
Yeah, I can break this down. So earlier in the game, we actually failed our dive, but this one was a lot cleaner. Uh, so we're looking to dive them, kill them, and take the tower. And we just have to be patient here. So I'm calling in the team comms, just be patient. Leona goes first. We'll see that. And then we just use the miasma again to ground them, kill them both, and then we juggle the turret aggro really, really well. So even though Morgana gets all her stuff off and the stopwatch, I start taking the tower, and then it's a clean dive right there.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that it kind of goes to show like the team actually set that up really well, and I guess I don't want to highlight too much of my individual performance.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pulled the wave to keep it from pretty much hitting you guys under tower. You waited until your wave was crashing. It was, yeah, executed really well. Better than some LCS dives, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it was representative of the rest of your game. You guys had superior team fighting and started coming together really throughout the rest of the game into a comp that like had Jax and wanted to split the map. You guys were able to force the action as a group, and that really was like the pivotal factor.
Yeah.
That tower juggling was
beautiful.
Yeah, I mean it was really well done. I mean we literally see LCS teams fail that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I mean that can be indicative of that league, but Bubble Tea's better.
Yeah.
Mhm. For analyst and Joe, I kind of want to probe on that. Why is it so hard to make that dive work? There's 4 people there. You have the ADC and support, but we see it, like you say, fail time and time again. What was kind of different? Was it just the patience? Was there a team comp difference?
So the first dive was a fail. Like we actually got aced. And the reason for that is they had a lot of counter TPs, and so it was mostly about the timing. Like the timing is a really really big deal. And the first time we failed, it was because the timing was wrong. The team had time to respond, and as a result, we got aced. But in the second one, they didn't respond with. They didn't have their TPs, I don't think, and so we were there. We took advantage of all the summoners that were already down, and then we just it was a relatively easy execution.
Did you think
So-
your communication from like dive 1 to dive 2 was really like the turning point for you guys? Was it just like a better communicated dive where you're like, hey, like they don't have TPs. Let's be more patient than the first time. Like let's learn from our mistakes.
So if I recall from the communication, actually it was less about the communication because I think we communicated the same, and it was more about the incoming wave. So our wave was crashing on the first failed dive. Our wave didn't crash fast enough, and also I think we had less time, especially with the TPs, the enemy TPs coming in. But on the second time, our wave crashed a little faster, and they didn't have their timings again with their summoner spells, so that allowed us to really uh, put in that second dive a lot cleaner.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
With this match, we saw that the student council had a pretty decent lead at the beginning, and then mid swung with a couple of those fights, especially in the longer term sort of game. With team comps, I think this one is a very distinct show of that. Was there anything that you wanted to see a little bit more out of the student council or out of uh, the opponent's analysts, or anything that you saw that was like, oh man, they really shook it up with that team comp?
I think looking at it, I think you guys had a gold lead. Like you guys had the advantage for a bit, and I think how to press that advantage and snowball that.
For me, there was a moment where you were just left out to die. And I would like to see a little more protection for your AD carry, particularly later in the game when you're pumping damage and you're melting down their front line really effectively.
No,
I
please
think-
go.
Yeah, I think a ton of it just kind of came down to executing the comps out correctly. One team, the Milwaukee Bucks, baby, drafted a teamfight comp, and even though they kind of had some trouble getting there, they eventually got to that apex where they're able to say, okay, let's like pile in our gigantic front line, Cho'Gath Leona, let's take these 5v5s. And one team didn't have a team comp. They had a Jax that could side lane. They never really got the Jax in the side lane. And I think it was just kind of like one team started coming together when it came to like communication and going towards like those win conditions, and one team didn't really grasp the win conditions as like well as the other. I think it was well played by both teams, and in the end, it kind of came down to like a team executing on their game plan better than another team.
Very very awesome. Well, are any last comments, Joe?
Nope. Just keep on rooting for the Milwaukee Bucks, baby.
Awesome. Yeah, they had a wonderful showing, and they're definitely a team to cheer for. For our next team, no, our next clip, we have the Executive Order versus True Heart Destiny, which 2 of our analysts are a part of. Let's take a look at this.
So what we're looking here is our top laner and jungler going in for a fight, and they get collapsed upon, you can notice that Aphelios and Yumi are bot lane moving up, so they just get dunked on right here. But as they're greeting for the turret, they will overstay, and we're able to turn it around completely.
Those poppy mechanics, though.
Yeah.
So that's fairly aggressive as well. It seems that the Bubble Tea League likes to dive under tower, and the coordination seems pretty well. What So like for vision and things like that, that seemed to be the big factor there. Seeing Aphelios and Yumi coming up and then attacking the solo laner there. Can we get a little bit of comment on how that was set up?
Yeah, what were the team comms like?
Oh, I
So
think.
for
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Brian. You were
Sure. It was honestly like pretty clean in the second half of that fight. Where Aphelios and Yui came in. We knew that we were going to engage that at any point. I even said I think at some point like we can just 3v5 them. Like this is an easy fight. I messed up my black shield and got knocked away. But even with that, we kind of just ran them down. We knew the strength that we had in our comp revolved around the 3-man core of like Morgana, Aphelios, and Yumi. And considering that 3-man core was still intact, like it wasn't really ever a question in our minds that we would turn that, especially if they stayed. Yeah, I don't really think that anybody had any second thoughts or anything like that. And I think the biggest like upside of our team is like we're really decisive. When we make a call, there's really no question about it. We just do it. And if it turns out badly, we redshirt after the game, something like that. But it never really like changes how we play the game out. We just have faith in each other, and like we have a lot of faith that the things that we do, like the 3v5 turn, are the right things.
Nice. I mean, do you guys have one specific shot caller? Is it one clear voice, or is it all of you guys kind of making calls and listening to each other?
I'd say we're all talking. I think there's a ton of communication loops in our team. We use the sub that game, Omar. Thanks, Omar. And he was talking a lot too. There's a lot of threads going through the team. I think if we had to like choose like the catalyst, like it's probably like me out of mid lane. I'll communicate my waves, and we'll try to sync up with like my jungler and my support, and we'll try to like make those moves on the map. But like realistically, it's everybody feeding information, everybody being on the same page. I think what teams should aspire to be, and like at any level, teams should aspire to be like on the same page, like non-verbally. And like obviously we're not there yet. I don't think anybody's there yet. But I think like we're kind of like already trending to that point where we're like there's not very many calls where we all like just where one person says something and I'm thinking something else and Dan's thinking something else. Like we're getting closer to the point where we kind of like understand what we all want to do, and sometimes our talking is this affirmation of like what we already know.
Yeah, confirming that we have the play in the same ideas going through our heads.
Dan's what with those sort of plays, because they are big plays. What does that do for the morale of your team? Does it just swing it fast, or do you just keep the course? Are y'all cheering? Are you excited? Kind of what's the mood after you make like a good dive like that?
We're popping off, honestly. We 3-man 5v3, like we beat them, and the clip ends with us getting an ace, and the fight lasted so long that Shen respawned and was able to use his ult to come back in to finish it off. So for me, it feels great to be able to pull off plays and being able to trust my teammates to respond to what I do.
Right. Yeah, I think we're definitely like in a motion heavy team, and like it probably contributes to like snowballing games. This game we've snowballed like pretty quickly after we caught a couple of advantages. Yeah, and I think maybe down the line it hurts us. Maybe we start losing and then it snowballs the other way or something like that. But we're working hard to make sure that we keep things positive, and our energy isn't lost when we're like on the back foot, and we're able to like keep that energy going, and then like regain leads and take control of games that we're behind in through just like pure energy and pure like enthusiasm.
Awesome. I'm gonna toss to Zoidberg real quick. If you're on the other end of this, how do you keep the morale up? Like, what's kind of the thought process, the strategy?
I mean, I think especially in this type of league where like games can be really volatile, I think you just have to be like, okay, cool, that didn't work out, like, and move on, and like figure out why it didn't work out very quickly. But like, you have to keep your comms positive, like you said. Like, if you start slipping into the oh, this game is over, we lost, like you're doomed. So you have to really focus on just moving on really fast and having a really short-term memory and just being like, great, that didn't work. We cannot fight their team unless we're killing Aphelios first.
Oh, awesome. Uh, any last thoughts on that match? Anything that popped out to y'all?
Joe?
Joe?
I think the main thing is just for the enemy team to recognize like the power spikes of the champions, and just because Aphelios Yumi is a really scary combo, even down in a was it a numbers disadvantage. So that would be the, I guess, advice moving forward for the enemy team.
All right. Well, the next matchup that we have is going to be the Good Boys versus Panic in Our Oceans. And we'll cue up the clip here and we'll give it to the analysts to take a look.
So what we have here is a dragon fight, and you notice the Zac is going in for the steal, misses it. Ashield comes in, trying to bail out his jungler, but he's locked down, like excessively so. But it's great. So they're all collapsing, but watch the Hecarim here. Hecarim is going in, goes for the dive onto bananas and isolates them. But Syndra and Kaisar are both focused targeting the Hecarim, while the rest of the team is holding off um, the Good Boys here.
Yeah, a lot of this fight kind of breaks down into comps. The Hecarim was able to kind of just go backline and kill somebody, and the Nasus isn't to like critical mass yet. And in terms of backline, the Vygar is really strong at this point in the game. There's a ton of like crowd control in that area when they dove to try to get backline. There's just it's pretty difficult to get past like the Zac plus the Zac that got like what's it called, like ulted by Vi early in the fight. So they were missing like some tools to even go backline. They're trying to go backline into like a really hard comp, whereas the Hecarim kind of just like had unfettered backline access. It was kind of just like one of those like perfect storm fights for the Good Boys. Later in the game, as like Nasus scaled and was able to be more of a threat on his own, some of those fights like really flipped on ahead. Where like regardless of the unfettered access, Kaisa has a lot of self heal, and the Vygar Ash combo on Good Boys just didn't.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those fights where like if you don't have a really strong mental, like that can tilt your team. Like that's you thinking you have the advantage, getting the dragon, being a man up, and then losing your entire team. I think they went 4-for-1 there. And like they clearly like regrouped really well and were able to stay in the game and keep a good mental state, and were able to come back and win.
With diving champions like Hecarim, it seems that the all-out attack is devastating, especially in these sort of team fights. The teams were completely split, and it makes for a very hard decision for what the opposing team is supposed to do. Right? Do we peel? Do we take the front line that's already caving into us? But I think that they, especially the team that had Hecarim rush in, followed through with the plan. At least that's what I saw. If at least that's what I saw. Do y'all have any comments about that? The follow through that the team has to have for a deep engage like that.
I mean, I think Kurosaki split the fight really well. He completely negated basically their entire damage and just had them all focus onto him, and he was able to survive. And if they're able to continue doing that throughout the rest of the game, that's a winning combination. But that's also really hard to replicate over and over and over again, especially when you have a Vi who can, in theory, just lock onto the Hecarim at any point and peel for her Kai'Sa. And also, as Brian said earlier, like the Kai'Sa can peel herself, so it becomes challenging to repeat that over and over. That's a really high execute comp, basically.
Yeah, later on in the game, we actually saw Kai'Sa 1v1 the Hecarim. It was a close fight, but in the end, she came ahead, and it led to a Panic in Our Oceans victory.
Yeah. This whole game honestly can be characterized by like a timer. Panic in the Oceans was had the freedom, I guess, to take their time and scale into the game. Kai'Sa, like at a certain point, could become unstoppable. There's really like not very many answers to her. And then like Nasus at a certain point is unstoppable. There's 2 immobile carries. He just runs at them, kills them all. On the other hand, like the Good Boys had a Hecarim as like the person that was popping off, and in the back line, Hecarim drops off pretty hard later in the game when Kai'Sa can peel herself and they have more options to deal with them. Yeah, they're just kind of like on a hard timer to make sure like things were happening, and Panic in Our Oceans is really good at like stabilizing and making sure that they bridge their early game and mid game draft deficits to get to the late game. And then when they're in the late game, you have Nasus in the late game going after immobile carries. It doesn't really get more free than that for that Nasus.
Joe, let me probe a little bit more about how important timers are in like team objectives, especially with champions like Hecarim who are very early and Nasus who are very late.
Yeah, so one thing I saw on the Good Boys versus Panic in Our Oceans games is the Good Boys were very late to a lot of the objectives, the neutral objectives, like that dragon. They come in late, so the Panic in Our Oceans, they take that dragon, but they get the good fight afterwards. But I saw throughout that game they were late to many of the neutral objectives, which means that Panic in Our Oceans has time to scale, which was their win condition. It was to have Nasus scale, to have Kai'Sa scale, and then as a result, the Good Boys just ran out of time, and because they took so much time getting to the other objectives, pushing their own leads. So that's what I saw.
Hmm. Any last comments about this match? All
No, I
right.
think it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful match.
Doggy
And our
brute force.
our next match, which is going to be our next clip, is going to be Acid Rabbits versus Second Breakfast.
So here we're seeing where Second Breakfast has control over Dragon, and we see a great steal by Sopa on Jarvan, and then immediately locks the team up in the Jarvan ult so that his team can clean up.
Yeah, a couple of like really major things. Their top lane didn't have pressure. He was coming back in the lane, and a Herald was on top, so they really couldn't rely on him, and it was just a straight 4v4. I don't know if that Jax at TP because the clip's not up anymore, but assuming Jax at TP, that actually could have been a 5v4 if they needed it, and it didn't look like they needed it. With that said, then the core of the comp has like Hecarim, Janna, Tristana, and Orianna, and there really wasn't like much of a tank line or any way to like really like section out a fight to make sure that like they could have any sort of front to back. They kind of just got pincered. Lucian had unfettered access to Orianna and Janna on the backside after like Sopa came in with like the smite steal. And Tristana was kind of like left stranded in pit. Miso was just really low after tanking too much of the dragon and getting dunked by Sopa. Realistically, I think that was like a pretty hard situation for Second Breakfast to be in. And Acid Rabbits really made the best of it with a good smite steal and like a good pincer on a team that was like pretty caught out after the dragon, even if they had taken the dragon.
With dragon fights like that, what after Sopa gets the dragon, steals it, what does that do to the opposing team's like formation? Especially because he dived in, he's in the middle, and then he immediately ults.
So you notice that at that point, Lucian had a huge gold lead. So he goes up towards Orianna and Janna and sections them off. So he alone cuts off the squishy backline, and so they can focus their target on what's immediately available within the Jarvan ult.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about follow up, right? Like we see a lot of these smite steals or attempted smite steals on Dragon, and a lot of the time that leaves the jungler that is going in like out on an island, and they die immediately afterwards, even if they get the steal. And like sometimes that's worse, sometimes it's not. But in this case, like he had the backup right there, and they were able to turn the fight really quickly. And like Brian said as well, like I think it also really matters that like their tank, Misa, was half health basically already, eaten quarter health by the dragon, so they basically didn't have a front line.
For junglers like J4 with the dragon engage, there's an importance on timing, of course, and getting everybody set up. And we've seen time and time again, it's the split of the opposing team trying to get into the pit. With J4, does he have anything unique about him that lets him steal a little bit easier? It seemed like he had that totally on lockdown, or was that more of the player in this case?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of luck too, right? Like smite steals are always a little bit of luck because especially if you don't have vision, which I don't remember if they did have vision there, but like it's always a little bit of a gamble going in by yourself. And like J4 has a little bit better because he can knock up the opposing jungler if he times it well and positions well. But yeah, it's honestly I think smite steals are a lot of luck.
So yeah, this was mostly the Dragon Steel was mostly a 50-50, but actually I would say it's more a 60-40 if you account for the confidence that the Acid Rabbits had, because they built up lane leads in every lane, and as a result, they just know they're stronger, and so Sopa has that confidence to just you know run in, or I guess dive in, press the smite button, and then Misa Barrock, he's kind of on the back foot. He's like, they kind of need to get the objective and get out. That way they can just try and scale and get back into the game. So uh, I guess that's where it's more about the player and also the confidence that the team around him gives him.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I also like I'm not sure because we don't have to clip up anymore, but if there was a level difference on jungler, that also makes a massive difference. Like if Sopa's
for the
smite does
smite
more
value.
damage, like that's just it's really hard for Misa to secure that Drake.
Mhm.
With a swing like that, especially with dragon control, we see that being a big factor in a lot of the games that we saw this week. Teams going 4-1, 4-2 dragons, pretty contested. So for something like this, how important are these objectives for the layman, right? Someone who's just maybe doesn't play league as much, and getting control of it, and how much risk should you put into trying to secure them?
Go for it.
I think that depends on which dragon. I think we can all agree that Ocean Drake is really, really strong, and if it's particularly Ocean Soul, it's pretty ridiculous. The other big dragon that people look for is the Infernal, and we don't need to even go into details as to the damage that Infernal Soul will do.
Yeah, I mean, I think dragons are massively important. Like if you're an early game comp, you want to basically on spawn get every single dragon that you can as fast as possible so that you can get the Elder Dragon as fast as possible. Because if you're early game and you can get the Soul Dragon at 22 minutes or 23 minutes, like you're ending the game before the opponent comes online, basically. So I think at this point, I think Riot has done a good job of like making dragons super important because they didn't used to be.
Does in your opinions as an analyst, do you feel like the jungler is the most pivotal portion of that, or do you think it's maybe the laners, maybe the support for warding? Is it just a even all the way around?
It's a team effort. Everybody
Yeah.
has to set up for dragons with vision and like lane priority matters a lot. If you have mid lane priority, it's a lot easier to transition to dragons. If you have a ton of bot pressure, it's easier to like move your bot lane out and force backs and get windows for you to take dragon. It comes down to draft a lot. Like if you have a really good early game comp with like a lot of bot lane pressure, you'll definitely open up more space to get dragons early. And like Colin said, with like early game comps, like I mean, dragons are a win condition in and of themselves for late game comps. So a ton of comps will like just rely on like, okay, we're gonna scale, hit our spikes, hit a dragon, get so strong that we're unstoppable now. So yeah, like it's a team effort, and top laners are like implicit in that too. Like setting up wards for your top laner, that's a thing that the entire team should be doing, and top laners should be looking for like those flanks to make those dragon plays. I guess free for a team that has like TP advantage or a team that has a stronger top laner coming in with TP.
And it
I think
also like sorry, I think it also like forces a team's hand, right? Like if the early game team has 2 drakes already, like you're essentially forcing the other team to react, and like they have to all of a sudden think about, okay, if we let them get this drake, then they're on soul point and we have to fight at soul point, and then the other team go, JK, we're gonna let you get your single dragon and we're gonna go to Baron. And like that feels really bad, right? Because it's one dragon which doesn't give you that big of a buff versus Baron, and you have to make that decision because like it's a rock and a hard place.
I go into the depths of this Infernal for Infernal and Dragons because it does set up for our next fight as well, between Deep Dive and Nutter Butter Scudlers.
Yeah, and really quickly before we get into that, this highlight is brought to you by Nabisco. Nutter Butter, enjoy one today.
Jesus,
I'm
we're
allergic to
getting sued.
peanuts, so
So don't enjoy it today.
Don't enjoy it today. Yeah, so I'll talk about this one since it's my team. This is Soul Fight, right? This is for Infernal Soul. We've indexed really hard into dragons. We gave up the first rift to make sure that we got dragons. And you can see we set this up really well. We have Anivia zoning out their entire team on the left side. We're TPing our top laner down right now. And it basically becomes really, really hard for Deep Dive to do anything here. They are forced to walk through the Anivia ult, which Kog'Maw gets basically quarter health, and the fight devolves from there.
Yep, this is just 2 comps running into each other. One comp has a ton of zone control, and one comp doesn't really have any methods to deal with it. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. There's too much stuff for Jack Limestone, the main carry, to really contend with as he tries to carry this fight. From Miasma to the Anivia ult, which really slows his advance, to Pillar, there's just so much to run through. Even Iceborne Gauntlet and Ezreal, so much to run through for him to like really be able to make an impact in that fight.
With that fight, it was fairly decisive that we saw. By the end of it, you see that most of Zoidberg's team or Colin's team has about 75 to 100% of their health because of that, versus the backline of the opposing team. A Deep Dive getting out with 25%, and they just kind of clean up from there. With the Infernal lockdown like that, it really opens up the game for Nutter Butter Scuttlers, I believe. I did want to get Dan's opinion about Jack Limestone real quick as a support.
He looks scary. Particular that game, he was really aggressive, sometimes a bit over aggressive. But one particular play where he jumps in with his support onto killing Janna, QE, and he lands Tristana bomb on her, autos it down, and then ults back to with a flying auto to hit both QE and Chilwang on Ezreal with that explosion. And that in itself shows me that he understands that champion really, really well and can execute it to near perfection.
one thing I want to talk about Jack Limestone is I saw a lot of really good uh, YOLO plays that were trying to actually get them back into the game, less in the Inti way and more in the Caps way. Was it G2 Caps? So and so that's what I like to see. Like I really like to see that even though they were behind, he knew that he had to at least attempt to control his own fate and the fate of their team, and that's what I like to see. So I definitely want to see more from Jack Limestone. Maybe seeing the team play more around him in the future. That way, I think they'll get a little bit more success if they do that way.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, go for it.
Oh no, please go, Colin.
Yeah, I mean, from our team's perspective, like we knew their bot lane was their win condition from champ select. So we knew we were gonna be falling behind there, and that's kind of why we picked really hard counter engage. Like Brian said before, like our team comp is miasma, we have a Nivea wall, we have a Nivea ult, we have Trundle Pillar. Like we have all these tools that can disengage any fight that they start. And you see that like once the team fights start happening, that's all that happens is they engage on us and we immediately counter it and stop their engage. And it was really, we knew they were going to pick Tristana from scouting it a little bit and banning out Jinx. So we just picked counter engage so that she couldn't just jump in and pop off.
I want to probe a little bit more of Brian and Joe here of the mentality of the solo carry. Brian talks about this a lot of the 1 versus 9 can defeat anything. How important is that for a team that's on the back foot, especially when someone on their team is either fed or being fed to carry?
Yeah. I don't know. Like Joe probably has a similar thought process on this. It really depends on like your role in the team, to be honest. I mean, like, I think you should always have the mentality that like, oh, I can be the one that is like the pivotal player here. But I mean, realistically speaking, like if I'm playing Morgana on our team, like I know what our win condition is. I know it's playing towards Aphelios. There's no way I'm going to make that game about myself, and like I wouldn't, right? I'm definitely going to play for our comp and like play for our win cons. But then there's moments when you're the one that's the win condition, and in that moment, a ton of times like you just kind of have to take the game into your own hands. In a world where I'm like everybody, like if I'm in a world where I'm man butts on our team, and I have to be the Aphelios with the Morgana support and the Yuumi support, I know I can play really aggressively. I know I have to play really aggressively. I know the only way my team really wins is if I pump in like the damage that's requisite of my position, of my character, and what my team has put into me. Um, so on that note, like realistically, if you're taking a lot of resources, like you should be expected to be that 1v9 carry. Like you should be expected to be given those resources and excel because you have those resources. And sometimes games come down to like, can you do that and can't? Like maybe you can't do that. Maybe because of the comp of the other team or whatever, you can't do that.
Joe, is
Jack
there?
Limestone, like comp wise, like was kind of blocked from getting that 1v9 in this game.
Mhm. Joe, as a top laner, is there any difference in the attitude, or is it the same?
So I guess to agree with Brian, like it depends on your champion and your role. So let's say, for example, you are that carry role, like you are the Aurelia or Renekton or something that needs to carry, and that in the top lane it's more of an island, but at the same time, it's, I guess, if you partner up with your jungler as the top laner, then you could take over the whole top side of the map, and then suddenly it's there's so much effort that needs to be put into the bottom side of the map that's like it puts a lot of stress on the enemy team if you can do that. So it's um I forget my whole point. The whole point, I guess,
Hmm.
should be like you need to, if you're put in that carry position, you do need to just man up and just, you know, go for broke, because if you don't, then you're really doing more of a disservice to your team and your own winning condition if you don't do that. So
That was good advice. Um, those were some amazing clips, amazing plays by all our players from the Bubble Tea League. Thank you, analysts, for giving your insights on those. And next up, we're gonna have our prediction. Very exciting. So we're gonna start off with the first on the top of the roster for the Bubble Tea Docs, which would be True Heart Destiny versus the Good Boys. This game's gonna go on later today at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Can't
Yeah.
vote against my own team.
Yeah, I mean, you can
Yeah.
see our predictions there. It's 5 across for True Art Destiny. It pains me because the Good Boys has a special place in my heart. So I want to vote for the Good Boys every week. But yeah, in this case, I think it's gonna be True Art.
I think the main reason for I believe True Heart Destiny going to be winning that game is the team play is just much cleaner. Like as a team, they have, or in their first week, they had a really clear goal whenever they were going for objectives. They may have messed up a little bit. Some people kind of died, but the point was they put Man Butts into the carry position. He put his team on his back, and then it worked out. And so I don't currently see week one Good Boys. They, like I said earlier, were late to a lot of objectives, and so that to me screams the team's not quite together. So and League of Legends is, despite solo queue, a team game. So that's that's why I see True Heart Destiny winning out in this match.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
we touched on it a bit before, but like True Art Destiny looked like they had really good communication and really good objective control. So
Yep. We're not gonna take our matchup for granted. We know like the Good Boys has threats, and we know that like it'll probably be a hard game. I think they're a good team. But yeah, like obviously I can't bet against myself. I think something
Can we?
that I think that something that we're looking to have is like a pivotal factor is like that yeah, like overwhelming control of objectives. Like we're hoping to be able to take control of the game early and just kind of stack more people than the other team has at places where they don't expect. And if we're able to do that and we're able to kind of like dominate sections of the map, I think we can zone control them out. So should be
Very
a good game.
awesome.
Tune in.
Yeah, it's gonna be later today. For our next matchup, we're gonna have the Milwaukee Bucks baby versus Executive Order. That will be on the 5th at 8 p.m. Pacific. Analyst, what are we thinking about this game?
I mean, it's Milwaukee Bucks, baby, all the way.
yeah,
Um,
again, there's 5 of us all voting for Milwaukee Bucks on this one.
Yeah, I think this team has a lot of moving pieces, and I've mentioned this maybe before in the analyst that's even next week, but I think this team will be really good down the line. They just have a lot of pieces to put in place. Like one of them was Joe playing well, which he definitely did in the first week. They had some early game issues in the first week. I think they were like down before their like successful tower dive. They were down like 9-1 in kills. Um, they had issues, but going later as the game progressed, they kind of really just gelled together and were able to make bigger plays that were equal to greater than the sum of their parts. And that's I think how this team should be viewed, greater than the sum of their parts. And I think that as the season progresses, I think they'll just get stronger and stronger.
Yep.
Ver-
I can't bet against my own team as well. So yep.
Very awesome. Our next game is Nutter Butter Squid versus Acid Rabbits. And if you pull up the predictions, we actually see something pretty unique.
I'm the odd man out.
So I'd like
So-
to just ask you, Brian, what makes it different? That's very strange. You usually put it on point with your other analysts.
I think Acid Rabbits had a really clean victory in week 1. Like it was the cleanest victory of the week. They have a lot of balance on their team. Like nobody's really a slouch, and they were able to use like mid jungle pivot really effectively. I think that in this game, like it's going to be pretty big. Their mid jungle pivot was really strong. I think their bot lane is like really consistent when it comes to like making sure that they're always performing. I think Acid Rabbits will just like be a pretty solid team in this matchup, and I think they probably have like a more balanced palette of players than NBS does.
So
said,
for
I think
me,
it'll
this
be a
one
close
was
game.
sorry. For me, this was really close. But I valued the mid jungle synergy of NBS pretty highly Colin here knows already how I praise that. And I think that brings a lot more cohesion to their team. So I don't know how much cohesion AR will have just off of one game.
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree with Brian. For obvious reasons. I think AR was super solo lane heavy. From that last game, and I think that's what helped them get such a clean victory. And I don't see that happening in our game. Like, I think we're going to be able to make it much more. I think we're going to be able to transition it out of laning phase pretty even. And if that's the case, I think our synergy is going to come into play.
Sounds awesome. This match, in case I didn't mention it, is on the 16th at 8 p.m. Pacific. And then we have our fourth match, which is going to be Second Breakfast versus Deep Dive. And that's going to be the 15th at 7 p.m. We also have another person that's out of the loop. Let me ask Colin, what made you choose just Second Breakfast?
What made me choose Second Breakfast? I mean, I just played against Deep Dive, and I think they're gonna be a really strong team, and I don't think they're there yet. And I thought Second Breakfast looked decent, and I think they will be able to pull this one out. And I think that's pretty much what I'm basing it on. Is like, I just played against Deep Dive, and so the feeling of like, it didn't seem like they knew what their win condition was or how to get there yet. And I think that comes with playing together and getting comfortable with each other. And so I think that will eventually come, and they're going to be a really, really strong team. But I just don't think it's there yet.
Joe, if you want to come in with representation for Deep Dive, why do you think they're going to win over Second Breakfast?
I think the main thing will be the bot lane. So Second Breakfast bot lane, unfortunately, is very weak from what I saw. Mooney was a bit AFK, and Fire Knight, he was having a tough time, and he was getting zoned out of a lot of XP. And the pressure is going to be exacerbated with Deep Dive, especially with Jack Limestone coming in. He is, I believe, a much stronger laner and carry over Alki on the previous week. So I think if bot lane blows up really, really badly, then that's why I think Deep Dive will win, because mid is kind of an even matchup, I think, and then top is kind of an even matchup. I'm not really sure about the jungle. I can't really think about it right now, but I think the bot lane is going to really blow up, and it might spiral out of control.
For Fire Knight, aka Zane, we're hoping that he, if he doesn't let it hemorrhage, I think that will make a huge, massive difference. And I'm very excited to see if he can match up, especially with Jax Limestone's performance from last week.
Yep.
Any last comments about Deep Dive? It sounds like Joe had a pretty good concise. So the last matchup we have for this week is actually going to be Panic Nart Oceans versus the Student Council. It's going to happen later today at 7 p.m. So we're going to have two overlapping matches. Hopefully for the Student Council to end before the next match. But we'll see how we can pull it out. Let's see how the predictions go for this. I think this one was a little bit more split up with myself, of course, choosing the Student Council, and Colin choosing the Student Council.
That's not
no,
true.
Nope,
not
that is not true.
That's not true. That would be Dan's with the Student Council.
Yeah.
Apologies.
No, it's all good.
We haven't seen each other because of Corona, so
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very
Mhm.
So for me, I saw the Student Council make really, really good plays in their first game, and I'm hoping that they can rally after a tough loss in the longest game of the league so far, and be able to pull out a win after that.
I think Ginny is too smart of a player to allow the student council to make like the same macro decision mistakes as they made in the first game. They had a really good game, and I think like people played really well across the board. They just kind of like misevaluated their comp. Ginny is going to recognize that really quickly and set them on the right course. That said, I still pick Panic in Our Oceans. I think that they have more of a ticking time bomb in the top side. Amberlin really overperformed in week 1, and it was something that was surprising to pretty much everybody. And I'm hoping to see that continue, and hopefully they'll have like a lot of working parts on that team that like kind of like fit together to make that time bomb effect happen. Nathan, if he's allowed to like get out of control, definitely gets out of control. And like in the game against Good Boys, like it was a close fought game until it was not, and then Nasus was a champion, and then when Nasus became a champion, it was kind of just over. So not necessarily like he doesn't have to play Nasus for that. Nathan, I know, has a ton of champions in his wheelhouse that can really have the same effect on a team, which is almost like a sense of impending doom. Maybe he should have been on executive order. Who knows? But yeah, like I think that the matchup will be close, and I think the student council will have a really. I think this one could go the distance, like the Milwaukee Bucks student council game. But I think like in the end, I would give the edge to Panic in Our Oceans for having like more clear win conditions.
Yep, I agree.
That's why I picked Panic in the Oceans.
Very awesome. Good predictions. Very exciting, guys. A lot more split than last week. But I think as we start to go further into the season, maybe it won't be so homogenous, which makes the league even more exciting when people have different opinions about the same team. Especially this time around, we had 2 different analysts have very separate ideas, which I think is a really good sign for the Bubble Tea League.
I think it's actually really interesting. Each of us picked one game that we basically divvied from the pack. Yeah, so each of us has one game where we're like, I don't like the other 2 guys. I'm gonna go my own way.
I mean, we gotta edge out each other in our predictions.
Yeah, we can't all just be 4-1. We gotta split a little bit. So it'll be interesting.
Very awesome. Now, before we head off into the current standings and the schedule, we have a couple of questions from Twitch for Joe. Joe, you ready?
Yeah, I guess I am.
All right, perfect. So we got a first question, which is going to be from Sultan, which is Nikolai. Are we going to see any interesting mid laners this season, or will we continually be utility-based wave clear machines?
Honestly, I feel that BTL it tends to go more on the safe side, and you need to kind of have a strong personality to just say, screw it, I'm just gonna play Zed mid as I've played in the past, or something really really crazy and kind of more explosive. So mid laners tend to be this current meta. They tend to be push wave and then go roam onto the side wave, and that's less explosive than a solo killing Zed play, for example. So I think it really depends on the personality of the mid laners, which I think those personalities probably exist more in the top lane this season. Mid lane is probably more of a passive role this season of BTL. So that's what I'm seeing. I guess to answer your question, I don't think we're gonna see crazy mid laners, mid lane champions at least. But unless I were to go into there and then start blowing things up, which I kind of did as Cassiopeia, but that's not.
It's a control mage.
That's a trait. That's a. Hey, I still
That's a control
dominated. I
mage.
still dominated. We still dove. We still dove. But anyways, yeah.
The question is, are we going to see non-control mages? And like the answer is like I think that depends on the teams, right? Like if it depends on how your team is playing. If your team needs heavy assassin damage from the mid lane, you're going to see more aggressive out of that. But like if your team plays around controlling objectives, you're going to see control mages like Cassiopeia.
Well, I guess the way I like to play Cassiopeia is a little bit more aggressive. So maybe, but then again, that's just my general mindset. So yeah.
Another question from Chia Snacks, aka Elena. Which lane do you think is the most dominant this season, and why? Just general lane.
Is that specifically to me or all of us?
That's
You
gonna
take
be
it first.
yeah. You take it first.
Okay. Well, I guess I think the strongest players are probably in the top lane this season. And then yeah, I think that's it. What was the question again? It was
No,
who was
that's the answers exactly.
yeah.
Which lane
Okay.
is the most dominant? Which one's going to make the most impact? We'll get into MVPs and who you think was did really well, but we're just seeing who we feel about the lanes currently and how we feel about them.
Mhm.
I think he's probably right. I think the strongest players are probably in top lane in terms of solo carries. I think the most important lane this season is going to be jungle. I think objectives have become way too important at this point in League, and I think that's largely on the junglers to control.
Yeah,
I could see top
I
lane
can
being
agree with
pretty
that.
good.
Yeah, I think realistically after week one, I think the most impactful lane was probably mid in most of these games. Mid pivots are like super important in these games. Like the Acid Rapids game, Mayan had a ton of mid pivots that like resulted in tower dives, had a lot of pressure, and like opened up Sopa to do whatever he wanted. In our game, we pulled off like some tower dives in the early game and like had a lot of mid pivots into like Dragon side to like pick up free stuff. So that was the game where I think the mid was like pretty pivotal too. I think like even in like yeah, like I think even in the game, like your game, the NBS deep dive game, Kog'Maw just like took too long to get there, but on Anivia you were able to like control the mid pivot, and like that controlled a lot of the dragon space and like gave you time to get to the zone control dream that you wanted. Realistically, like when we're talking about control mages, like, and we do talk about like personalities and stuff, and I think there is like a personality facet to it. But realistically speaking, I think a lot of the mids that are being played right now are mids that are like just consistent, consistently like getting space in lane. So like say like we saw a couple of mid Morganas, including myself, because it's so easy to like shove lane and then move and like make sure you're syncing with jungle and make sure you're syncing with your bot lane. We saw a lot of like picks that were able to like just be consistent at like shoving, consistent at moving off your wave, and consistent in team fights. And something that like Joe mentioned was like BTL teams like to play safe, and I think there is like there's something there, because like a lot of teams want to say like index towards the team fighting comp, or index towards for our purposes like essentially like a solo carry comp, and like a lot of the times like what facilitates those comps are mid laners making sure that they always have control on the early side.
You're changing my mind because now that I think about it, I did just play the mid lane in our game. I swapped from
Mm,
top to mid lane, and we got that control in the mid lane. So, oh, but I still think the individual players are stronger in the top lane. But yeah, the mid is probably, I agree, now the more important role for general winning of the game.
Yeah, I think in bloodiness the top lane's gonna be really bloody, so that's
Yeah.
for sure.
that's always exciting to watch. I absolutely enjoy that. It's just wonderful. Let's do a quick MVP, your personal MVP, and a quick reason why. Let's start off with Joe, our guest.
Oh man. Honestly, I wasn't expecting that question, but if I were to say the one that impacted me the most, in terms of just like surprisingness, is Jack. I think even though he lost that game, I think he put a lot of impact into that game and even kept them in the game as long as they did. So I think I would say that was the most impressionable player of the week for me.
Dance?
Oh, this is a hard one for me. I'm looking through the whole roster list,
I, I, I,
and
I think we should pick people not on our teams if we're
a-
going to go with who made the best
absolutely.
impression.
I would say Offerstein. He pretty much was a carry threat coming from the jungle. He had pretty much lane CS numbers, and is the current Deathless player.
Colin.
Oh.
Yeah, he really quickly just to add on to that, he also has the highest CSD per 10 right now from the jungle, which is insane. I mean, it's only one game, but that's insane. So yeah, I think either I'm gonna split mine. I'm gonna split it between the two Morgana mids that I saw. I think it's either Kodo or Man. I think both of them played ridiculously well in Morgana mid. And really helped decide their games.
I'll give it to Offerstein as well. Actually, I think he had a lot of control over tempo. And as the game went on, like he really just like controlled team fights and like, yeah, like his team obviously helped him out with a lot with that, but like he kind of buoyed the early game. Their bot lane, like their bot lane had a tough time against the limestone lane because the limestone lane was really strong. And Skysong played really well too, but Offerstein was able to like balance pressure there and all over the map honestly, and just be in the right spot at the right time the entire game. So I think it was him.
Very awesome. Before we get into the schedule and what game we're most excited for, let's put up the standings for the current week. Even though it's just week 1, there is technically first and fifths. So we have Panic in Our Oceans, Milwaukee Buck Babies, True Heart Destiny, Acid Rabbits, and Nutter Butter Scullers with a win. And Good Boys, the Student Council, Executive Order, Second Breakfast, Deep Dive with their first losses. However, it is just the beginning of BTL, so we are excited to see where this goes. Let's take a look at the schedules one more time and get kind of everyone's opinion on what they're most excited for. Let's start off with Brian.
Yeah, I think my most excited or the game I'm looking forward to the most is this first game today. Yeah, the first game today, Panic in Our Oceans versus the Student Council. I think it'll be a banger. I'm looking forward to two teams that have a lot of their strength focused in the top side, go at it, and honestly, like a lot of this is just I think we just saw stuff missing from the last couple of games that like could be there. Like both these teams are really good, and I think that they overperformed in some ways in the last games and underperformed in other ways. And like I think if Student Council is able to put it together and like just play their comps out correctly, like they just get astronomically better. I think they might have honestly won last week. And then Panic in Our Oceans, like if they just like fill out some of the check boxes they need to make about like mid pivot into like jungle and like just communicate a little bit more. I think they're going to be a really strong team that always has win conditions. So that game will be really exciting to watch.
Colin, who are you excited for this week?
I am going to selfishly pick my own game, Nutter Butter Scuttlers versus Acid Rabbits, and I realize that that's selfish, but I'm going to explain why. It is the only matchup this week between two 1-0 teams. Every other matchup is either between an 0-1 team or a 1-0 versus a 0-1 team. So for that reason, I'm really excited for that game. I think it's between. Personally, I think our team is really strong, and I think Acid Rabbits is really strong. So I think that's going to be telling to see, like, it's going to be a really good early benchmark for both teams to see where we stack up.
Dance, how are you feeling about this week?
I'm on the opposite end for Colin. I'm looking forward to Second Breakfast versus Deep Dive. I want to see one of our teams without a win to get a win, and it's guaranteed in that matchup.
Very awesome. And Joe, who do you think is going to have the most exciting match?
I guess I have to agree with Brian. I think the teams match up really well. They have strong top laners. I think not to put you down, but you definitely overperformed in your last game, and I think if you keep that if you keep that up, you definitely can match bananas in the bot lane. In the mid lane, they tend to be more controlled, so I think it'll really be about the jungle, and that's an exciting matchup between Amberlin and Man Puppet. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, amazing, guys. There's a lot of good games this week for our second week of BTL. I really want to thank all of you for joining us. Brian, Colin, Daniel, thank you so much for being a part of our analyst desk once more.
Yeah,
And-
absolutely. Thank you for having us. And we're going to be doing this on Sundays now, right?
Yes, it's going to be Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific is when we're going to start doing the bubble tea time. And also, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being on here. We appreciate your insight and answering questions from Twitch. It was awesome to have you.
Yeah, it was really fun. I really appreciate it, and I hope to be a guest in the future.
Guys, thank you again for
Gotta keep
joining.
winning.
Gotta keep
Yeah, gotta keep
Yeah.
winning.
Thank you again for joining us for this week's Bubble Tea Time. We'll see you next week, and good luck on the Rift.